Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
This is Ed Cohen in San Diego, and you're again on Global TV Talk Show, globalbusinessnews.net. We are broadcasting today from Toronto, Canada, with Dr. David Weiss, founder of Weiss International Limited. He's got several books under his belt, and and they're all bestsellers on the business side. And we'll get to you in just a moment, so you could do a much better job than I just did. Ken Summers, an international HR leader, has many years of working in Europe and also in Asia Pacific. And he's based now in southern Connecticut. And Stephen Howard is now based in Mexico City. And although we met in Palm Springs for dinner with Joanne, and we've developed a talk show series called Thrive XL, Strive XL. Stephen, let's go to you first. Welcome again.
Thank you very much, Ed. How are you doing today?
It's great. Thank you for your emails this morning. I look forward to February or March. That would be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the latest book is number 22. And what do you think? Will it be out this year?
It'll be out
in 22?
It'll be out in 22. It'll be out in 2/22, hopefully. I'm aiming to get it out in February, March at the latest. We'll see. Spending all morning writing and editing it. It's starting to flow very well. Thanks.
One of the things that we talked about last week or the week before, it was before Christmas, was the idea of crashing HR. And so we're going to come back to you on that.
Well, you're going to win me a lot of friends.
Well, we want to get everybody gripped here and then go forward. Ken, what do you think about crashing HR before you hear Stephen's remarks?
Well, I'm not quite sure what crashing HR means yet, so I'll reserve judgment.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, and Dr. David Weiss and I have done 2 shows or 3, I believe, and I asked him to join this gathering at kickoff the new year with high energy and advanced intelligence briefing about what he sees. He has international clients. Last time we spoke, he happened to be in Israel, and we did a broadcast. But that had nothing to do with the broadcast. It just I wanted to mention it. So, Dr. David Weiss, thanks again for being involved. What's your latest book? It's about innovation, right?
So my last few books have been about innovation, and it's been translated into multiple languages, called Innovative Intelligence. And that book really focused on how do you deal with complex problems, and we're facing complexity constantly, and that's going to be something I'll refer to a little later when we discuss executive demands and what's the new CHRO going to have to deal with. And the more recent one was a book about HR and CHROs called Leadership Driven HR. And that book really was saying how HR really needs to step up, take a leadership role. We've seen the pandemic be a demanding time for human resources. You know, you got to be careful for what you wish for. They've really been at the situation where they've had to deliver. Many have done a brilliant job in this very trying time. But that's what that second book was about.
So lately on LinkedIn, I live on LinkedIn, so I watch everything. And I've seen that you've taken a fondness, a real liking to the infographics that almost is like cartoonish. So what's your take on that?
Well, my experience is that the learning process has radically changed. In organizations, I just completed a large benchmark research project that found that people want bite-sized learning. You know, they don't want long, drawn-out things. One benchmark company had 36 hours of training for their employees and leaders, and they cut it out to 5-minute segments. So we got to do bite-size, and infographics are beautiful bite-sized pieces. You don't have to click on anything, and they're all out there. So I curate them and I find them. And then what I do is I explain what it's about. Of course, I reference the source. And it seems like people really enjoy it. So it's at at my site on LinkedIn, and everybody's invited to connect.
Yeah, I've been saving them up in case we
Great.
come to a dull moment here, but I don't think that'll happen. So, but it's almost like childish, but it's not.
Well, I think it's, an attempt to summarize in one pictographic what is some key deep insights. And it's a tricky thing to do. There are some who are brilliant at drawing these things, but I'm finding organizations are doing that now as well. They're no longer presenting long reports. They're trying to summarize it in a one pager that gives them the key data, the key questions, the key issues. And all that is actually, I think, a positive development because, it's hard to get mind share. And if you have it in one page, you might be able to get it.
Ken Summers, you and I have had these conversations, especially with some of your special guests on the shows, having to do with people management and, of course, getting into feedback, and like our talk with Sergi in particular. And what do you have to say about what David has just said about the idea of innovation within HR? Is it possible, or is that an oxymoron?
Oh, no, I think David is spot on. I haven't read the book, but I will absolutely look it up. But I think that it's almost intuitive that HR has to step up or be at risk of what I suspect Stephen may be saying, that we should blow it up.
Okay, Stephen.
All
You're
right.
at that. You're at that.
All right. Blow up might be a too strong word, but maybe not. Maybe I like the concept. What I was said to Ed and to a gentleman named Greg Ward, who runs the Institute for Respectful Leadership a couple of weeks ago, and it's part of what I put in the books coming out, is I'm advising leaders to fire their HR department. And yeah, and then you kind of get that right. And then it's easy when you say this, harder to say this in writing. But when you say this like in a keynote speech that I've done, you get people's attention. And then I say, and then I want you to hire the back 30 minutes later as the human capabilities department and have them focus on the culture of the organization, have them focus on how to create team engagement, have them focus on development and learning, and take all the operations part of HR, which is very valuable, as we've seen during the pandemic. So I don't think I'm an enemy of HR here, but put that in operations. So let the operations people specialize in all operations for the organization, including the HR processing, the operations side of that, and have the HR department, forget the word resource. And part of this, I guess the backstory to this is the book and my thinking is about how to become more of a human leader. In fact, one of the phrases I say there is leaders have to unlearn management and relearn how to be human. So with that as the background, and then the human capabilities department would now help, the marketing director marketing director has a functional responsibility about branding and customer service and all that kind of stuff. You can't really expect every marketing director to know how to be great at team engagement, how to do great at motivation. Let the human capabilities department be there to support him or her in that endeavor. So blow it up. Yeah, I guess you could call it blowing it up, but and I think it goes to partly what David was just saying is make HR at the forefront of a key aspect of how organizations are going to grow. So there you go.
So HC, human capabilities. Stephen?
You want me or Ken?
I'm sorry, Ken.
I thought you meant Ken. Go ahead.
So I'm not going to argue with that, Stephen. I might take it a step further. And in fact, I'm working with a client right now where we're looking at their HR strategy. And the first question I've asked them is, aside from, what's the business strategy so we make sure everything is aligned, is what's core and what's non-core? And, the operational dimensions of HR is a good example. Do you really need all that operational stuff, all that administrative stuff, sucking up resources, sucking up capability, when you could either have an ops team do it or just outsource it?
Yeah.
And
policies and procedures should be operational.
Yeah. So I find myself embracing your thinking, maybe not 100%, but conceptually, I'm on board.
Thank you.
I am. I think that our environment has created the opportunity for people leaders. And I noticed, by the way, increasingly HR departments are starting to rebrand themselves as people departments.
Yes. Yeah.
And I hope it's more than a fad, but we'll put that dimension aside for a moment. But I think the focus has to be on how do we develop, deploy, and leverage the human capabilities of the organization to deliver business results.
So I'm going to reintro a little bit Dr. David S. Weiss, President and CEO of Weiss International Limited in Toronto, specializing in innovation and leadership and HR consulting for Fortune 500 and other groups. David, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, so one of the things I've been looking at with human resources, first of all, the name is so passé. It's outlived its usefulness. One time was personnel, of course. We do need to evolve it. If you look at human resources leaders, I know we refer a lot to CHROs, but I see people and culture, I see talent and this and all over the place. So clearly HR is in flux. So, whatever the name is, it hasn't landed yet. And good luck, Stephen. Maybe you'll land it, and who knows.
Capabilities.
But what I've been doing is, in fact, thinking about what HR can learn from other parts to actually make the transformation. And one department I've been really looking at is marketing, because marketing, in a way, is actually creating an understanding of the customer. And how does HR, in its role, actually mirror some of those interactions to deal with the individual in a different way, to ultimately communicate the way people want to be communicated to actually, when you do customer data, link your engagement data to the customer data. So if I have high engagement and low customer response in that area, I should be really concerned. Why is it high engagement and the customer is not satisfied? We need to start integrating HR. And you mentioned earlier, Ed, about innovation. I kind of see HR as being a driver of innovation. And innovation becomes a prequel to HR's role that we've been asking them to do in being a change management leader. But now it's not just about implementing changes that others have come up with, but they've got to drive the people and leadership capacity to come up with innovative ideas through learning, finding the right talent, and stimulating the environment in a different way. So HR's got to integrate, learn from broader sectors, and by doing that, I think will contribute tremendously to transformation.
And they can make it safe to fail.
Absolutely. We've, from Google's research in 2016 on psychological safety as being the #1 variable in high-performing teams, HR should be driving issues of why can't people speak up? Why are people afraid at executive team meetings to say what they believe? When that occurs, we know that there's going to be some systemic issues that will limit your effectiveness, and HR should be a driver of building that kind of culture.
And so there could be a contest, this is just off the top of my head here, free flowing. They could be a leader of how many times can you fail and still keep your job? and make it a contest. Okay, I'm done.
but I have to comment on that, Ed. I'm not sure that the number of failures is the right metric. Maybe it's about the scope or the size of the failures. Little failures are okay. I think of Stephen Covey, right? He says you try lots of little things and you find the one that will be a big success. Creating, to leverage off what David said, to create the psychological safety to try things and to do it in a controlled way so that if you do fail, it's not going to wreck the enterprise.
But also psychological safety means it's okay to admit that you failed and to share your failings with others in the organization. Therefore, others don't replicate or repeat the same mistake. And that's what's critical about it. It's not so much the failure as such as, although obviously big failures are terrible, but it's the learning from the failure and it's the communication of that learning from the failure, cascading that throughout the organization. And many organizations are not very good about that. I mean, many organizations have a blame and shame type culture, and that stops that from happening. And you have to get away from that.
Actually, I think that the whole notion of using the word failure for what we're describing is an error.
Yeah.
And that we need to get away from that. Wade caught on was as a provocation to say that, we need to start doing stuff and not be perfect the whole time. We need to iterate, and came out of design thinking to iterate in a different way. I'd much rather use the word to iterate, which basically says we have to do more experimentation as we're introducing things. And every time we experiment, we're going to find out if it worked or didn't work. If you call it failure, that almost gets a visceral response that says, I spent my life not trying to fail and do well. And we're using a loaded word, which had an impact, which was useful. But I think it's gotten to the point where, that's not what we really mean. We don't want you to fail. We want you to learn. We want you to get agile in your learning and keep on growing and experimenting and iterating in order to find the best possible solution.
So if we can go to the word interface, which is a computer term meaning two different things, people just touching and then going forward into a new world together. So with that in mind, bringing in stakeholders to break down silos so that the HR person is partnered with marketing, partnered with finance. Stephen, what do you think? Is that too old-fashioned, or do you think it's too new?
I'll go back to what David was saying about thinking of HR from a marketing perspective. If human resources or human capabilities thought of their customers as the employees, right now HR, if you did a blind survey, I would argue that the majority of HR people said their customer is the CEO or the C-suite people. That's who they report to. That's who they're trying to make satisfied. Flop that, and what David was talking about is if HR had a customer service attitude or customer marketing mentality, then its customers would be the employees. And it kind of flips that on its head. By the way, I just saw, I'm going to do a sidebar here, David. I saw a quote this morning I think you'll love. It comes from James Joyce, and I'm going to read it. It says, "A man of genius makes no mistakes. His errors are volitional and are the portals of discovery." So that's exactly what you're talking about.
Good.
Yeah,
So
David.
I go to David. I think that marketing perspective of how HR should function, how HR should think, would be a critical factor in future success.
Yeah.
So David, you work a lot with boards rather than senior managers, or
Both.
equally as much.
Mm-hmm.
And so the board thinking, it could be a hornet's nest of problems, but it could also be, well, they got the power and the money. So there you are, you've got your audience.
But it's a very important issue about board governance. One of the problems on boards is most of them are underutilized. If you think about what a board is a diverse group of people who from time to time are giving attention to the company, to the nonprofit organization, to whatever organization it's representing. And they're probably the most diverse and have the greatest understanding of what the various audiences out there are really thinking because they live there in that environment. So they should be spending time on the most complex issues that benefit from that kind of diversity of talent, rather than spending so much of their time hearing a report out from the audit committee, a report out from the president, a report out from governance. And we're not utilizing the conceptual capability that group really can deliver to kind of create what is the new context that we're operating in, what are we forecasting, and deal with those most challenging issues that they're facing. So I actually have found when you unleash the power of a board, you get some tremendous benefit to the organization as a brain trust for innovative ideas for the organization.
So Stephen, let's talk about leadership, the boss in this problem of nobody in the chairs in front of them. And some companies are opening up as soon as it's clean and safe. So will they revert to their old ways, or will they somehow miraculously change?
Well, I think a lot will revert to the old ways. I'll be selfish here and say if they read my book, they'll go to the new ways. But I think the smart ones will learn. And one of the things I think when I talk about leadership, it's not the C-suite. It's right down to the frontline leader, the supervisor, the team leader, the manager, and in many ways they're the ones who change first. It's going to be hard for those in their 40s and 50s have been doing managing leadership for 20, 25 years. It's going to be hard for them to change. It's going to be uncomfortable. I've often said Yoda is my favorite philosopher, and Yoda says we have to unlearn what we've learned. And I think leaders need to, as I said before, leaders have to unlearn management, and they need to learn to become humans again. And those who do that, they're the ones who'll have staff loyalty. They're the one who will grow their businesses. They're the ones who'll see less absenteeism, less people calling in sick, less presenteeism. They'll see less conflict in the workplace. And those who want to go, the great phrase that I think Ken said was the safe haven of the past. Those who want to go to find that safe haven they're the ones who are going to get racked by the great resignation of 2022, which will be the follow-on to the great resignation of 2021. I can't remember who said safe haven. Sorry, David, if it was you. I misquoted somebody, I think.
Ken?
It's perfect.
But Stephen is spot on. And in fact, I think the great resignation of 21 and 22 is part of our next normal. I don't think that's going away, because I think we've seen a sea change in the power relationship, and that the pandemic has caused people to reevaluate what's important to them. And to pick up on what both of you have said, I believe that frontline manager or leader, whatever designation we want to give that individual, is really one of the critical pieces in the puzzle, because he or she is the one who's going to be working with people who are sometimes in the office or sometimes at home. And the set of capabilities that the frontline manager in a hybrid environment has to develop and deploy is very different from what we've historically had in terms of manager training. Big challenge, big opportunity.
Sorry, Ken, I talked to so many leaders just about 2 years ago, and particularly ones I was coaching. Everyone said, "Oh yeah, okay, so I'll have to manage people remotely. This will be temporary." What was thought as a temporary skill in 2020 is now a permanent skill, and that hybrid thing is not. That's going to be flexible too. Some people work permanently hybrid. Some will work temporarily. Some are going to be hybrid in a transitory situation. So the ability to be agile and lead people in constantly changing workplace scenarios is going to be a challenge going forward.
Yeah, but I think that one of the elements that we should look at with this great attrition, as everyone's noticing now, people are leaving, is why it happened. And all of a sudden it occurred. And so the research we found was that in the first third of the pandemic, people were anxious, and organizations were really responding to the anxiety of people and trying to help them out. And then the second third of it was a lot about exhaustion. So people were really tired. It was exhausting. And organizations were responsive to that. They were saying, you got to take some time. We got to protect you in certain ways. But now the third part is getting to a new stage where they're getting angry and they're getting edgy, and they're not happy that this is dragged on. There's just a lot of problems going on. And at that same time, organizations are saying, come back to the office. So they're no longer thinking about the employees, they're thinking about themselves. So why are we surprised that employees are getting angry and expressing it by saying, you know what, I'm going to leave. This is not my place. You want to come back. It's not about coming back to the office. It's about, you don't care about me anymore. And ultimately, I'm going to exercise my right. And it's happening all over. I don't know if you're seeing this as well, Stephen, in your executive coaching practice. I do a lot of executive coaching internationally on Zoom and on Teams. And I'm finding that with executives, they went through this pandemic with mental health problems, just like frontline employees. Usually mental health is, those employees. But the executives, they got power, they weren't affected, but they were equally affected by the pandemic, maybe not in the same way because they're very privileged, but they ultimately had a lot of issues. And so I'm finding in the coaching process that it's not only about strategy and where do you want to go and making good choices, but it's about your life and about mental health. And when organizations forget that responsibility and start just thinking about, I need you back in the office because that's the way I like to lead, and I'm comfortable as an executive when I see you all the time, then in fact, I think those organizations are going to suffer considerably over the next little while.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yes,
David,
Ken.
excuse me, Stephen. David, you're spot on. I mean, my universe of data is probably more limited than yours, but I'm seeing exactly the same thing. And increasingly, I'm coming to believe that wellness in all its dimensions is going to be one of the critical differentiators for successful companies and as we go forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Stephen, I interrupted.
No. Thanks, Ken. No, you're absolutely right. And I totally agree with David. I was going to just say, I'm living in Mexico these days. And one of the people I discuss a lot about this with is with one of the major family-owned conglomerates here in Mexico. In 2021, they added 80 IT people to their staff. But he said 80, so they're growing. So they added 80 IT people. But he said when they were doing the recruitment, the number one question that these IT, mostly engineers, software designers, those kind of things, they were designing apps and websites and what have you. Their number one question was, can I work from home? And if so, how much of the time? And if the answer was no, you have to come in. And this was mid 2021. Then they said, I don't even want to have the interview. Just take me off your list. I'm not even interested in interviewing for the job. So it was a requirement that they had to have some flexibility. And I think part of that is if I look at this kind of historically, we used to hire people, we hired their time. We said we hired them for their skills, but basically we hired people for their time. We said they had to work 8 to 5 roughly, depending on the company. And we dictated where they had to physically be. Now I think organizations have to realize we need to really truly hire people for their skill set and then work with the employee and to drive where will they work best, where will they deliver upon their responsibilities and their duties, and the hours that they do that have to be flexible. And we've got to get away from this mindset that it was almost the plantation mindset that we hired people and they had to come work on our farm, so to speak, and they had to work these hours and they had to physically. That's for the most part, other than obviously manufacturing stuff like that, but certainly for office work, where we said we hire people for their brains, that has all changed in my mind.
And it creates, I think the term that's becoming popular is the risk of proximity bias. Because
Yes.
if your leadership team is in the office and chunks of your organization, particularly your knowledge workers, are remote or in a hybrid arrangement, those water cooler conversations aren't going to include he or she who's remote. And I'm sure you've seen this in your research, David. Women tend to prefer remote more than men do for lots of reasons, some of which are obvious, others that are less so. And are we going to inhibit our ability to achieve diversity objectives, DEI objectives, if we don't deal with what I think will be a very real proximity bias, which gets me back to that frontline manager and giving him or her the ability to be effective in a hybrid world.
Ken, you had a lot of experience recently working in Poland for
Yes.
a very multinational company. So what do you think? What's your insight when you think of Poland and Eastern Europe or Europe in general? Are they looking at the same issues as we're looking at?
Oh, absolutely. I was on the phone with, wasn't a client, it was a colleague, a former colleague, just earlier this week. And just because Poland is on the other side of the ocean in Eastern Europe, doesn't mean that the challenges they're facing are really any different than what we're seeing in America or in Japan or in Singapore. These are global issues.
It's
Yeah.
just, Ken, that your point you made just a moment ago about proximity bias, just want to take that and build on it, because it's an extremely important point. But I think it also reflects a broader issue around essentially unconscious bias overall, which proximity bias will be a new one. But there's so many unconscious biases that are exhibited by people who might not be exposed to other perspectives. So I'm seeing right now in the whole DEI field a tremendous amount of effort being placed not only on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actually belonging and decolonization and those kinds of languages that are being used on a regular basis, but I'm actually seeing that it almost starts with your unconscious bias that you might have, where you don't even know you're biased. And you don't even know that you're doing something wrong, because people say, I'm appreciative of diversity, whatever that would be reflected in. And then when they face, questions and see that, oh, wait a second, it's me, there's that insight. And we need senior executives to go through processes to recognize what their unconscious biases, which will include, Ken, proximity bias, which means you're going to make an error about something that, because of that error, it's going to make you make a choice that really is incorrect, but you might assume it's correct because of that bias, and we have to avoid those errors.
Totally agree. And getting the C-suite to pay attention to that, never mind actually go through sensitization to those
Correct.
issues, is going to be a big challenge.
We are pleased to welcome Adamo Education as a proud sponsor of Global TV Talk Show.
The concept of a microschool is the reimagining of the one-room schoolhouse. My name is Tamara Becker. I'm the president and CEO of Adamo Education. The microschool concept really does not just lend itself to the personalization and the customization of learning, but also the social development and fostering that sense of love for learning. Unlike what we see in traditional brick and mortar schools, we have multiple grade levels in the same learning space. Students can be enriched by the socialization that they get, as well as the academic support from peers. What differentiates Adamo is the fact that we are taking the best pieces of brick and mortar, of digital, and then at-home learning. Students here can come 5 days a week. They can come 4 hours a day. It will really just depend on what is best for the student and for the parent. To enroll, just reach out via phone, text, or email, and we'll have that personalized conversation, and we'll be able to get you all set. Check us out at adamoeducation.org.
Hi, this is Ed, and I thank you for tuning in to Global TV Talk Show, a unit on globalbusinessnews.net. We broadcast to the world, as you know by now. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that our programs are advertising supported. We're grateful for co-sponsors, advertisers. They have a marketing budget, coupled with a strong desire to be associated with our top quality program. And of course, I'm grateful. Thank you. So for the next few minutes, you're going to see some commercials. It's mostly very low key, and our prices are very, very reasonable. Our exposure for the advertisers go 12 months and beyond. Some of our advertisers have been with us since March, April of 2020. And Google Analytics has tracked over 125,000 what they call audience page views, which means you looking at this page, that's a page view. Now, if you happen to go to one of our other shows or to our radio broadcasts or to our newspaper or magazine, those become additional page views as measured by Google Analytics. And so when they say 125,000 since spring of 2020 up through Labor Day, a month ago, That's pretty good numbers. And the past 30 days, Google Analytics has measured just under 6,000 audience page views. And that, according to them, is a 42% increase in audience participation over the month of August. So thank you very much. Well, here's our advertisers, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes or so, and we'll proceed with this interesting conversation. Thank you.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by heirs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at heirs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we're researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
and we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
So I want to encourage you guys to use the chat thing down there and exchange emails or website information, and make sure you have a good connection going forward. So everyone's really busy. And so, Stephen, what do you think will be a crisis coming out of the social political divide in the U.S.? Crisis in terms of business leadership.
I think that's a great thought-provoking question, Ed. I think leaders are going to have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and they're going to have to get comfortable with having difficult conversations around topics like this. I know I was doing some work with a company in Louisville last year, and about 6 or 7 months after that tragic shooting of the young woman in Louisville, and they were struggling, how to have those conversations around that, whether it was, in this case, it was partly racial, it was partly the police aspect of it, it was partly, a couple other things. Leaders are going to have to get comfortable in having those conversations, create a safe space where people can discuss it or not discuss it. Certain things you don't want to be discussing in the workplace necessarily. But and when I'm talking about discussing, I don't mean discussing the issue. Discussing how people feel about the issue. How's it impacting people? That again goes back to the well-being that David was talking about. So if I was running an organization or even a department these days, I would have an environment that's if something's happened that's upsetting you, let's talk about it. I would use, again, this is the strength of HR. What are our HR resources or our counseling services that might be available to employee if they're really impacted by something like that that's going on? So I'm not advocating that we need to have a team meeting to discuss, the latest incident that's hitting the newscast, but I am saying we have to have a psychologically safe environment that people can come to me as a leader and say, I'm upset, or this is bothering me, or this is impacting the way I work.
And so it's good leadership to even broach the subject in some kind of a town hall email or something, but the idea is that customers are dealing with this.
We're all dealing with it as human beings. It goes back to what I'm talking about. We have to relearn how to be humans and how to have these kind of conversations without stepping on each other's toes, without fighting and adding more divisiveness to the workplace. Well, part of what I'm preaching is creating. Part of what I'm preaching here in the new book is also not just how to be human; it's how to create a harmony within the workplace. And no one talks about harmony. No one talks about harmony. And so I've actually created a word that incorporates harmony into my concept of leadership.
And that word?
The word is humany, HUMONY. So it combines humanity and harmony. So I'm calling it humany leadership. And with that focus is that part of our job as leaders now, this is very different than 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Who cared about harmony in the workplace? We cared about results. Now I think, we've all shared this 2 years of the pandemic and all the social issues that are dividing us, the climate issues that are dividing us. We need to figure ways to create harmony in the workplace, which will reduce conflict in the workplace, which will go right back to what David and Ken talked about, how to increase innovation, how to increase productivity, and all that's going to impact the bottom line positively.
Ken?
Ed, I was just going to say, Stephen is eloquent. I can't add anything to that.
You're so kind.
No, but how do you argue with stuff that makes sense? But I wanted to just broaden that out a little bit. You asked Stephen about to react to the North American environment, but I wanted to point out that what I'm seeing when I talk to friends and colleagues around the planet, and I'm fortunate to be able to do so, is that this is not a uniquely American issue or North American issue. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in the Far East. I mean, it's in India. The society is fractured, and humanity. Tell me again the word.
Humanity.
Humanity is a concept whose time may have come.
Thank you, sir. I'll let you review the book on Amazon for me.
It's such a pleasure to listen and learn from you, Ken and Stephen and Ed. I just want to highlight that, we're asking people to do something which is really challenging. They're not used to it, to, get beyond hierarchy, let people who are junior to them speak up and say things. And what I'm finding is that through the work I do in executive coaching, mostly, remotely because people are anywhere in the world. And what I'm finding is that executives need a safe place to talk about these things and therefore almost get permission to experiment with allowing different conversations to occur. It's a very lonely job when they're at the top. And most of the time, they are uncomfortable sharing their thoughts. And, so I would, all the executives who are listening to this, I would really encourage you to find an ally, find someone who you can talk to openly, because it's lonely and individual choices might get subject to biases. But when you talk it out with someone who could actually think with you and really discover what do you really want to do, you'll make better choices. And that's really what you ultimately need to do to create the environment that's needed at this time.
Yeah, David, in your current experience, excuse me, Ken, are you seeing the top level, the board, the presidents using a broadcast mechanism as a town hall thing, or is it just few and far between because they're afraid?
Oh, no, I'm seeing, we're all exposed to different organizations. I'm seeing the utilization of town halls being something that is using electronic means, using Teams or whatever technology they're using, being a total surprise for executives about the extent to which they're reaching their populations. In the past, if they'd have town halls, they get 20%, 30% of the people showing up. And now when they do it electronically, they're getting 90%. And their reach is great. So I would really be surprised that people go back to what they were doing before. And if they want to go back, the people are going to leave them. So they're going to be forced to ultimately live within this new environment, which is here to stay. People have finally had candy. They see that, as Stephen, you said, this isn't about, what did you call it? Hire them for time and ultimately, like the plantation model. But, it's the skills, it's got to be flexible. All that kind of stuff is really going to be the new reality. And if you don't accept it, people will make choices.
Exactly. And you can't grow your business if you're spending a majority of your time replacing lost workers. If that's one of your key, if you come in on Monday every week and one of your key action items is to replace 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever number of people you've lost, how the heck can you grow your business? Exactly. Yeah. And this is not going to be expensive. This is not like, having to create a new brand of a company and put all that into marketing literature and stuff like that. It's not so much developing the new idea or taking these concepts that we're all talking about on board. It's really escaping from the old ones. It's getting rid of those shackles of our old
unlearning,
ideas.
right?
Yeah, getting rid of those shackles, because that our natural inclination is to go do it this way. And we've got to stop and pause and say, is there another way I could be doing this right now?
And for all those executives that are worried about, but where's the money in this? The research is so strong that if you have a highly engaged employee base, especially knowledge workers, what you'll find is it will turn towards customer value and then ultimately shareholder value. So, the line of sight is really clear. The research has been around a long time. 5% improvement in engagement gets you 1.3 improvement in customer satisfaction and 0.5 improvement in shareholder value and profitability. There's a line of sight. So everything we're talking about today with this great team here ultimately will deliver business value that you can sell to any board or any organization, that this is a worthwhile endeavor.
Well, with that in mind, we are approaching the 45 mark. We can continue, or we could bring to a close. David, what do you want to do?
Well, I think it's been a really terrific conversation. And Stephen, Ken, Ed, just great to chat with you, and look
Let's
forward
do it
to
again.
reading
Ken?
your book, Stephen,
Absolutely.
and hearing from you, Ken. All the best to you.
Same to you guys.
Ken, do you want to sum up about what you're working on now for the new year?
Well, no, if I can, I'd rather take the moment to ask one more question of my colleagues here.
Sure.
Because David, you said something that really grabbed my attention about what you're seeing in your coaching practice. And I'm wondering if you and Stephen are seeing some of what I'm seeing, particularly with senior leaders. You may have agreed to, we're going to work on X objective with you. Are you finding that in this environment, they want to just talk in a safe place, in a place where they can be vulnerable? Because I'm seeing that more and more.
Yeah, I tend to, I focus on what they want to talk about. So my favorite opening question, and it's like nice to, is, what's on your mind?
Yeah.
And invariably what's on their mind is, sometimes specific to a challenge they're facing, but those they know how to handle in many situations. It's those complex ones. It's about, I'm not sure how to respond to these kinds of issues, these interpersonal relationships, these situations where there's no clear direction. I call those complex issues. And they want to think it through and just explore what the choices are and what's possible. So Ken, I'm seeing the same thing as well as you're seeing.
Yeah, it's like it's an evolution in the process.
Absolutely.
Steve?
Yeah, the same, and one additional is a lot of the ones I talk to at your senior of reporting into senior leaders is they like to express their frustration. They see me as an ability to say, look, I'm frustrated. I'm going to give up. I don't know if I can do this much longer. I can't, I'm getting, I can't understand why people are leaving. And so that for me as a coach, it's also that safe place to say, okay, let's talk about resiliency. What are you doing? How are you bouncing back? And then resilience is not just bouncing back, but what are you doing for yourself? How are you taking care of yourself physically, emotionally? I mean, one of the questions I ask this one guy all the time is, how many times you've exercised this week? Because he used to go to the gym like 5 times a week, and it got down to like 1 during the pandemic, particularly since the gyms are closed. And now it's like back up to 3. Good. What are you doing? What are you doing for stress control for yourself? And then what are you doing for your own mental wellness? And then what are you doing for the well-being of your staff? So I spent a lot of time, it seemed much more than a few years ago, a lot more time on those emotional aspects of leadership.
Thank you both, and thank you, Ed, for indulging me. I'm not surprised, but it's nice to have it's nice to have the validation. So thank you,
David. Thanks so much for your time again, and please consider joining us again. And let's go say 30, 60 days out, do it again, and we'll catch up, see what's changed, if anything.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. All right.
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
you. Have
Thank
a good
you.
one.
Thank you, David.
Bye-bye.
Ken.
Stay well. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.